If you're stuck in a trauma bond, your brain isn't broken and you're not weak for staying as long as you did. What's happening to you has a name, a mechanism, and a way out, and by the end of this, you'll understand all three. You keep asking yourself why you can't just leave. You've made the list. You know the relationship hurts you more than it helps you. And still, some part of you keeps hoping that if you just wait, just try a little harder, things will go back to how they were in the beginning. That isn't a character flaw, it's a trauma bond, and it's one of the most powerful psychological traps a human being can fall into. The term was first introduced by researchers Dutton and Painter in 1981, and what they identified wasn't weakness. It was a predictable neurological response to a very specific set of conditions. Here's the mechanism behind it. A trauma bond forms through a cycle of mistreatment followed by intermittent positive reinforcement, and at its core, it depends on a power imbalance. One person controlling access to warmth, validation, and safety, while the other scrambles to earn it back. One day you're being criticized, ignored, or shut out, and then, without warning, that same person becomes warm, apologetic, even loving. They tell you how much you mean to them. They make you feel like the only person who's ever truly seen them, and your brain, starved for that relief, latches onto it completely. This isn't about weak willpower. It's the same neurological pattern that keeps someone pulling a slot machine lever, because unpredictable rewards flood your brain with dopamine, creating stronger attachment than consistent ones ever could. And when that bond forms through cycles of coercive control, oxytocin, the same chemical tied to deep attachment and trust, gets released during the reconciliation phases, chemically reinforcing your connection to the very person causing harm. That unpredictability is exactly why your nervous system starts treating chaos as safety. When highs and lows repeat often enough, your body stops registering the relationship as dangerous and starts registering it as familiar, and familiar feels safe even when it isn't. Some researchers compare this pattern to Stockholm Syndrome, though trauma bonding specifically describes intimate relationships where the power imbalance is ongoing and the harm is personal. You begin mistaking intensity for intimacy. You start believing that surviving conflict together means you're bonded, when really, you're just describing what it feels like to survive someone else's behavior. Here's a simple test that cuts through the confusion faster than any label ever could. Picture whether you'd ever be allowed to treat them the way they treat you, whether you could dismiss their feelings, mock their insecurities, or disappear for days without explanation and still be seen as the reasonable one. If the honest answer is no, you're not in a relationship built on equality. You're in one built on a double standard, on a power imbalance that keeps you permanently in the position of proving yourself. And no amount of love from your side is going to balance that out. Part of what keeps you stuck is a story you're telling yourself about who they could become. You picture the version of them from the good days, and you hold on to that version like it's the truth. While their actual behavior, the version that shows up consistently and not occasionally, gets treated like the exception. Real detachment starts when you stop asking who they could be and start asking who they've actually shown you they are, over and over, without you having to beg for it. You might also recognize a pull to fix them, to help them heal, to be so patient, so understanding, so consistent, that they finally feel safe enough to change. That instinct usually comes from somewhere old, a childhood pattern where love felt conditional, where you learned that being needed was the safest way to be loved. But people who genuinely want to change do the work themselves. They don't outsource healing to the person they're hurting. If you're doing the emotional labor for both of you, that's not love. That's you carrying a weight that was never yours to carry. Here's something that rarely gets said out loud. Somewhere in this relationship, you stopped trusting your own perception. You stopped knowing what you were allowed to need without feeling selfish, what you were allowed to feel without being told you were overreacting. That erosion happens slowly, one dismissed feeling at a time, until you're constantly checking your own reactions against theirs before you trust them. Rebuilding that trust in yourself isn't a side effect of leaving, it's the actual work. It starts small, noticing a feeling and letting it be valid before anyone else weighs in on it, making a decision and not immediately searching for permission or reassurance. Every time you do that, you're proving to yourself that your judgment still works, even after someone spent months or years convincing you it didn't. Actual recovery starts with dropping the diagnosis hunt. Stop researching whether they meet the clinical criteria for narcissism or a specific attachment style, because the label doesn't matter. What matters is one question: do you feel safe, valued, and respected in this relationship consistently and not randomly? If the honest answer is no, no diagnosis changes what you need to do next. From there, boundaries stop being optional. Not boundaries you explain and justify and hope they respect, but boundaries you hold regardless of their reaction. If someone punishes you for having limits, that reaction is information, not an obstacle to push through. And the people most upset by your new boundaries are often the ones who benefited most from you never having any. For relationships that involve real harm, the safest boundary is often distance. Going no contact isn't giving up, it's removing yourself from an environment your nervous system has learned to associate with danger disguised as love. Many people leaving these dynamics also carry symptoms that meet the criteria for PTSD, or the more complex pattern called CPTSD, which develops specifically from prolonged relational trauma. And recognizing that can be part of understanding why recovery takes longer than you expect it to. And finally, expect grief. This is the part almost nobody prepares you for. Even when you know intellectually that the relationship wasn't safe, you'll still miss them. You'll remember the good moments more vividly than the bad ones for a while, and you might wonder if you gave up too soon. That reaction doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means your body is grieving the connection you hoped you'd have, not the reality you actually lived through. Healing from a trauma bond was never about proving they were the villain. It's about learning to recognize the difference between a relationship that feels intense and one that's actually safe, and choosing safety even when intensity feels more familiar. The version of you on the other side of this isn't someone who stopped loving deeply. It's someone who finally learned who deserves that love in the first place.